Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 46th live stream from the Misfit Gamers Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's homebrew review, I'm bringing one of my own kind of newish ideas to the table. This is something I've been toying around with for a long time, but I've had a recent new idea, new tweak to it that I really like and that I want to bring and get Kage's information on or his insight on, and then bring it to all of you and see what you guys can do with it. And then I think Kage also has a couple items or a couple topics that we might want to be able to discuss at the end of this. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him in, and we're going to just kind of get kicked right off, because today is going to be kind of a relaxed, chilled stream. So, you guys might notice things are a little bit smoother. They operate a little bit better. Hopefully, for those of you who have been here before, things look and sound just a little bit better.
Just a little bit.
We've recently gone through an update for a lot of our equipment, something that's just been... I did not expect to have done so soon, but Black Friday came around, and
listen, when it comes
happens.
around, it comes around. You got to take advantage of it.
Yeah,
that's good stuff.
So I'm really, excuse me, I'm really hopeful. Basically, the thing I'm most excited for, not just the improved quality of video and audio. I'm actually, and our lighting system. Hopefully, again, all the little things that you may not be able to know specifically why it's better. But I think the biggest thing that I'm most excited about is that I got a Stream Deck. This thing is just so nice, because one of the biggest frustrations for doing the stream is the setup and having to go through all the little things, make sure I mute everything, make sure I go to the right scene, and being able to have a Stream Deck finally, and just being able to at a click have a lot of things happen all at once, and it looks like it's like seamless right now, so I'm very happy with it.
We making it work.
Yeah, so that's it's an update. We're happy with it. Welcome to Misfit Gamers Studios 2.0.
2.0.
I guess, or would it be 3.0 at this point? Because I mean, 2019. If you guys go to our YouTube channel, Misfit Gamers Studios Live, and check out the Old Gods campaign, that is the very first attempt we ever did at recording ourselves for a podcast. It's rough. I'm gonna say it's rough.
Okay, audio is rough, but like the content is good.
I mean, I love the content. I love the series. I still have, I think I have somewhere, I think I have like at least 2 full seasons of content just unedited. We only have 5 episodes out, but that's just because those are all I ever got to. So, I mean, we were doing that for almost a year. So we have plenty of content. It's just, until we got to season 2, the audio is rough. And unless I want to pay good money for, either good software or someone who's a professional, it's as cleaned up as it's gonna get.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because you can only fix
really
so
hard.
much. You could, especially because if we had any level of the setup that we do now, multiple, we were working. We were lucky. We were lucky that we all had our own microphone. Like, I will say, for people trying out,
wasn't Vixie and I sharing a mic?
I think maybe in like one of the first episodes, but I think we killed that really soon. But like, we were like very, very lucky that we at least had to be able to hobble together, the 3 microphones on a laptop, no less, because that was the only place in the house that we could all get together, was in my living room in this old, and not even that bad of an apartment, but it was a smaller apartment. It was smallish.
Small.
But I mean, to get all 3 of us and the equipment, we had to have the laptop, and that laptop barely hung on.
It was chugging along.
It was chugging. Yes.
Is that guy still alive? Is he still running?
It's right there to your right.
He is still alive.
That's my dark web computer now.
All the good stuff on there.
So yeah, so we've come a long way, and I would say that if we consider when I really put Misfit Gamer Studios together I put it together before that, when I had the original idea of working with Lucifer on cornertablegaming.com.
Yes.
So that's back up and running, by the way. He has the site back up and running. And I think Dovd is still up there. Have you seen Dov's character sheet? Yeah. Have you seen it?
Was it? I thought it was like a background blurb or something like that.
it was back when this was years and years ago. I think this was like 2001,
I
2018,
forgot
2019.
I had even written that.
Right. So
That's crazy.
we did cornelltablegaming.com, and it was supposed to be a more of a friends based microblog for all of our D&D stuff. And I was still coming up with I was still in the midst of really putting together both High Point as a major moving point and Misfit Gamer Studios, right? I was still throwing all of that together, and I would say that the podcast I would comfortably say is the 1.0. This stream starting 6 months ago probably would have been 2.0. So this, I don't know, maybe 2.5. Maybe we're at 2.5.
See, that's
it's
what
not
my
really
question is. When do we use the 0.5s or the 0.2s?
So you got to think it's like it's
the O's.
The idea of like the 0.5 is or the 0.1s. Those are basically intermediate steps in the same phase, right? So Misfit Gamer Studios as a podcast is not the same as Misfit Gamer Studios live as we are today.
True.
So that's a 1 to a 2. But upgrading our equipment doesn't really fundamentally change what we're doing.
Yes, that is true.
Like 3.0, Misfit Gamer Studios 3.0 will be when we officially start making like YouTube content. That would be
very nice.
Like when we actually start taking, and now most likely this is probably going to be the beginning. Unfortunately, we have a lot of good content, but depending on the audio, it depends on how much we can use. But I think once we start becoming more of a YouTube based content creation, and I actually have a dedicated channel, not for just the live stuff, but for that,
right.
I think that would qualify us as a 3.0 move.
That's fair.
But this,
That's
again,
fair.
because we're really just upgrading the equipment and making the current stage better, it's probably still Misfit Gamer Studios 2.0. And you can also think 2.0 is the version that went live. Because I think only like 3 people outside of us ever listened to that podcast.
Listen. I mean, it's good though.
It's good.
Listen, we're sharing it with the world right now. It's out there, everyone. Please check it out.
Yeah, so I don't know what Lucifer is doing with the site, but I do know that High Point is still here. Gosh. And there we go. So wait, hold on. When was this?
So this is
2019.
This is old concept art, friends. I still have not gotten to put together like action, because I honestly, for Daft, I'm gonna get custom art created.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go.
This is
get
definitely
art.
this is no longer Daft as we ever know.
The mutton chops, man.
Oh my
God,
god, mutton chops!
He's got these long. They're not even shaved.
I don't even think you have long hair though with Daft, right?
No, he's more
like you're more monkish, right?
Yes,
you have like that, like so. It's so funny to have this look, and it's like that is like you don't have swords, you don't wear armor.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Age 12, male, 7'3". Yeah. That's it. That's all. Oh my gosh, that's all you have on there. There was nothing. There's no bio.
I swear, wasn't there like a little background blurb?
I thought so too.
Go to the homepage. I swear I saw it. Like, I was scrolling on there, and that's what caught my eye.
So he has his character that did, but I don't think your character did.
Huh.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
All right.
The good old days.
Yeah, man.
Oh man, dude, pressing a button and having things work is so nice.
Isn't it though?
Oh, I can't tell you how good that is.
Soon I'll be able to figure my stuff out.
No, I am excited. We did some testing for the audio and everything, so hopefully everything should be dialed in right now.
Yeah.
But one thing that I'm super excited to do on my own time is pull up an older episode, like one from a week or two ago with us, and have a listen.
Oh, yeah.
And then
nice
pop this one open and
Yeah.
actually listen, like not in my studio and outside with like regular speakers.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see just how different it is outside of like, in our confined space. And, with my setup, like being as it is.
Yeah.
I want to see what it would sound like if I were just watching us normally. So I'll probably do that tonight. Tonight or tomorrow. I'll check out what we sound like.
That sounds legit.
All right. So, yeah. So for today's homebrew review, it's going to be a little bit different. It's not quite a homebrew review. Let's face it. Today, normally, for those of you who are new watching us on YouTube, you'll know that homebrew review is typically where we'll take an item, either from one of our viewers or we'll go to like D&D Beyond or somewhere, some source. We'll take a look at it. We'll kind of review it first, first impressions, give our knee-jerk reactions, kind of talk about what we like, what we don't like from our personal perspectives and our experiences, and then we would, we'll offer up suggestions or alterations based on how we would like to run it as a DM, how we'd like to see it as our player ourselves, and then usually I will give it a rating, what I like to call a high point, 1 out of 10. And this isn't so much a rating as in how good it is or how good it is or how much we think the person, how well they actually did. In for me, a high point is more or less what's the likelihood that I want or will adapt it into my own setting in my own realm. So, a 10 out of 10 basically means I want the item. I'm probably, I'm having plans to take it in some form or another and will adapt it to my world. And then basically for for every reason that I would not have it in my world, whether it's, too many changes I would have to make for it to fit my setting, or, it doesn't fit a purpose, or if I already have something like it, or, there's a number of reasons that I will knock points off. And basically those are reasons that would justify me not taking the item and adopting it into my own world. So again, not so much a whether or not they did a good job or whether or not we think that, it's not so much a value. It's just more of a, how much do I want this item in my world and how much am I likely to use it? So it's more of a recommendation, I guess. If you can take it as a recommendation and how more likely I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we normally do if you're new here. And so today is going to be a little bit different simply because we didn't have an item submitted for this week. And I didn't really want to do a high-low on D&D Beyond. High-low is usually when I'm by myself. If Kage can't make it and I don't have an item, I'll go to D&D Beyond or some other source. I'll look at a certain category of homebrew items. I'll sort them by their rating or their ranking, and then I'll review the highest and lowest one, especially because when I'm by myself, I tend not to rant and go off on tangents as much. So you'll still get to get my entire viewpoint, but it won't be... it won't be as long, so I'll usually be able to get at least 2 items in for those ones. And then if you do, or if you're interested, not only can you see all of our previous homebrews in our playlists on YouTube, but if you just want to get a quick idea of some of the items that we've done and look at some of the ratings that we've done, like see the highest ones, we do have a leaderboard in the Discord that we're keeping up, so you can join the Discord. I'll go ahead and pop that in chat real quick. But you can, join the Discord. Let us know what you like about it. You can take a look at the leaderboard. You can even submit your own homebrew review items for us to review here on stream. You can ask us questions or just, generally just talk to our community. So that's in chat. If you see it, sorry, YouTube, you'll have to type it in manually, or it might be in the description once we do that. But yeah, if you're in Twitch, there it is. Hope to see you there. Oh, I can do this now. Okay, that's really nice to actually finally have a mute button. You don't have one, but I have one now.
It's fine. It's fine. I'll just give you a signal if I need to go on mute.
Yeah, but that is really nice not to just cough straight into the mic anymore. So today's going to be a little bit different because we don't have an item submitted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a new idea that I've had for a long time. I've been trying for a long time to alter how I do or how I see death saving throws. There's just aspects of it that I'm not entirely happy with, and I have my own way in High Point, but I've been tinkering with death saving throws both to look for alternatives because I do like to consistently look for different ways to do things and not just get set in my ways if they're able to be opened up. But I also want to find a better way to adopt death saving throws, especially if I work with certain types of gaming groups. I want to be more flexible with what they're used to, and being able to adopt death saving throws in certain campaign settings I think is beneficial. But I just don't like how they are as is. I don't like the idea that you go to 0 hit points, you get 3 rolls, and you're dead or you're not. For me, it takes away. I think you said it best right before stream. It takes away the fear of death. It takes away any value dying has, because it's more of a pause in combat if you succeed, and you know, like, once you're down in combat, it's relatively easy to get someone up. It's relatively easy to revive someone after battle. It's not astronomically expensive to revive someone after they've died.
It's doable. You got a couple of side missions, and you can
and that's only a
gold.
worrisome at lower level. The higher in level you go, you know, getting someone back is less a thing. So you removing the consequence of death and removing that consideration of, oh, well, you know, I'll only be out temporarily, or I'll just be back. Like, yes, it can be devastating. I'm not saying that it doesn't remove the consequence from combat. There's always a consequence in combat from someone going down, right? It's time economy or action economy to get them back up. It's also removing them, their damage, their output, and all of that. But what I'm talking about is on the player level, like the DM to player level. When you have someone who's facing death of their character, it really only seems to come into play when they're on 2 fails of a death save, right? It's like the only time it matters, because they're about to lose the character. And again, even then, they're not that worried about it, because there's most likely a way to get them back, unless it's going to be a TPK. So this bugs me, just because I don't like how clear-cut and basic it is, because there's nothing to walk away with, right? You succeed, and basically you just waste the time. And you fail, and there's more likely a way to get them back. There's no real fear of loss. And for me, going down to 0 hit points is bad enough. And I don't think that every single time it happens, some bad or good outcome should happen. But I feel like there really isn't any situation right now that really calls out, hey, you just got brought back or just went near death. Maybe you don't just immediately pop back to who you were, right? I mean, it's like, again, kind of taking a real world concept. People who basically go to near death don't immediately return, more often than not, don't immediately return to their life as is. Like, that usually takes a toll on you, whether it's physical, mental, some sort of way. Getting close to death, I think can have a toll on somebody. So I've been trying to figure out, how can I blend the idea of death saving throws with making them feel a little bit more, like they matter, right? Like giving them more of a reason,
right?
But also not bogging down every single time, because I get it. Sometimes death saving throws are kind of good, because if you reframe them from the idea of like consciousness versus death, right? If you kind of give one, like that's one of the ways that in the high point that I do it is I have a consciousness and a death barrier. So past 0 hit points is essentially unconsciousness. And then beyond a certain amount is guaranteed death, right?
Right.
But I'm reworking that now already in high point, because I don't necessarily because I want HP to make more sense.
Yeah.
So I'm actually currently adjusting my number. So instead of it being beyond 0 hit points, because it used to be based on a weird calculation where so many numbers, so many negative hit points, and you were still just unconscious, but basically incapacitated, and then a certain amount you were dead. And it was really weird, because you had to do a lot of calculations to basically make it make sense for the higher levels, right? The more HP you got, it's like you can't just make it like 6 HP below, because someone can hit you for 100 hit attack when you only have 20. It makes no sense. So what I started doing, what I'm shifting to now for before death saving throws, is an unconscious zone and a death zone, or essentially unconscious / incapacitated, and then death zone. But I'm shifting it from negative into some of the positive numbers. So the idea is I want to start working it to where the very lowest level of your HP pool starts to wane on you, like almost like basically you're within like 10% of 0, like only 10% of life. I'm toying with maybe starting to make negative like debuffs there. You know, whether it's to AC, attack, just you're starting to feel the effects, right? Kind of like what they did.
You get a little off balance.
Kind of like what they did with being bloodied, like having certain status effects, kind of similar to what I have for my my custom high point wizard class, where it's more fatigue based. But that's where I really want to start doing this idea of an unconscious zone. But it's like, how do you bring that into, you know, positive hit points, right? Like, you know, and so what I'm toying with is maybe like 1% of your life, because basically that would, for the most part, at any early level, that's 1 HP. Like 1 HP would basically be essentially like you could get knocked unconscious and have a chance to like roll a Constitution check to stay conscious and stay up and then heal yourself, but you could go down without dying. Then I can now use 0 HP and negative for you can go negative 10% of your total life before you're like outright dead. And it's the idea of how much damage beyond your HP. Because remember, HP is your ability to stay up in a battle. In locked in mortal combat for your life, HP is a representation of everything about you, your survival. So negative HP doesn't necessarily not make sense.
Out of curiosity, on that point, would you include... So if you're talking about locked in Mortal Kombat, right? I imagine the type of scenario of like a mom pulling a car off her child. Like I am in like the thick of it type deal. So that's not just like my everyday walking around.
Correct. That's why the idea of being slapped or punched in a bar with roleplay and then rolling for damage is a little ridiculous to me. Because the idea is, if you think about it on a mechanical level, peasants have 1 HP. You can slap for more than 1 HP. You can slap for 1 HP or punch for 1d4. Like, the idea is you could literally, you're telling me that every adventurer, every warrior, anybody who has a level can walk around and kill anything that's not a level. You got to look at it mechanically, right? You can slap someone in roleplay and it doesn't do anything to you. But the moment you go for the mindset that it's me or them, life or death, there's adrenaline. You know, there's focus of mind. There's your you know, for your background, right? There's combat, you know, sense. There's a lot of things that go into a fight. And so, yeah, we're not necessarily saying that every fight, like, you know, HP still comes into battle even if you're not, like, trying to kill them. Yeah. But the mindset behind HP is it's not just how many physical cuts you have, how much blood you've lost. It's just how many blunt, you know, like, you can get beaten with a stick and still lose HP, but you can also get beaten with a club or beaten with a sword. Like, it's not always the same type of damage. Yeah. It's the accumulation of, are you still conscious? Can you still stand? Are you still aware enough to wield your weapon?
If you take 200 points of psychic damage, what happens to your body that makes you drop and fall?
Nothing. You exactly. I mean? Your body looks fine, but you are fried mentally, and that's exactly it, right? And so that's why I prefer the unconscious and dead zones. I'm just playing with exactly how, because right now it doesn't typically come into play, but I want something better, and I just like the idea
of something there. Yeah,
I like the idea of zones better, because the constitution checks I like to have like more of like an overlap, where if you're in a certain overlap, your constitution check keeps you basically alive and conscious enough to heal yourself, whereas you basically have you pass into that aspect of someone else has to res you. Right. But again, I'm not trying to throw out death saving throws, right? Bringing this back to the topic at hand, I'm not trying to say that death saving throws don't have their place. I just don't like them as they are. And I prefer my way of leaving it up to the actual HP pool. But trying to fix them, and not make them too complicated, of course, because that's the problem with fixing a lot of things, is you don't want to make it too complicated. Yeah. So in trying to fix the death saving throws, in my opinion, I came up with another solution. So this one isn't so much me this is fixing all saving throws, but I did come up with another solution that I have, which I think is another thing that isn't really talked about too much. Which is, you know, critical failures and critical successes, right? There's a lot of different ways to handle, especially in combat, someone crit failing or crit succeeding on attacks. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how that relates to killing blows. Promise, all of this is funneling down to the same thing. But this is kind of where the topic at hand comes down to is, in my opinion, it's very, very easy to reward a critical success or a critical, a crit attack for a player who does it on an enemy. Very, very easy. High cinematics, high damage, letting them get to take over the narrative.
How do you want to do this?
Yeah, there's so many ways that you can reward that, right? And most ways are acceptable, and most ways are very pleasing to the players. There's far less ways to gain an acceptance of a crit failure, right? There's a lot of it's really hard to really work something in that makes sense and that everybody can accept when they crit fail, like during an attack. Whether it's dropping their weapon, breaking a bow, firing at an ally, hitting themselves. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but unless you're really, really dynamic and can make whatever happens really roll with the attack type and what was happening, crits fails are a lot harder to really make people feel good about. And there's also not as many options, right? You can only drop your weapon so many different ways. You can only stab yourself or a friend. So there's only so many ways that it makes sense to crit fail an attack.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas crit succeeding, there's plenty of limbs to cut off. There's plenty of different ways that you can say it looked cool. There's plenty of bonuses you can throw on.
The natural environment to do some crazy judo ninja stuff.
And in looking for opportunities, I have come across and played with people who use critical role tables, and
right.
And I like the idea of it. I think they're great, especially for those that aren't as dynamic narrators. My problem with the critical role tables typically is the same reason that it's the same generalized reason or same generalized issue that I have with most role tables. Is they're either too broad or they're too out of context in the sense that they don't make sense for what's happening,
for the
right?
particular situation you're in.
That's why there are that is exactly why there are so many treasure rolling tables, because they realize they have to roll up a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different combinations. Mm-hmm. And that's why critical and failure roll tables feel just as displeasing as you can drop your weapon, you can break your weapon, you can hurt yourself, you can hurt an ally. If you're DMing just those constant categories of crit, the roll tables also feel the same way, right? They feel out of place. They either feel too little happens or absolutely far too much happens, and it just feels disruptive when you also use those as they're intended to, which is on every single crit as well. Right? Every crit success or every crit failure to do a crit table, I think, is a little excessive.
I do know there are some people that will roll to see if you roll on the crit table.
Yeah,
so it's
and you can do that
roll
as well.
a d6. If you get a 5 or a 6, then we'll roll on the crit table. Otherwise, it's just a powerful hit. Or
exactly.
Same thing with the misses.
Yeah, and no, so that's another acceptable way to do it. So again, I'm talking, I'm bringing up all of these things because it's kind of funneling down to my idea of the modifications. So one thing I was looking at is, when it comes to death saving throws, you don't want to overcomplicate every single time. There is a justification for you went down in combat, you should have a chance to stand back up. Totally agree with that. And the concept of a death saving throw, 3 rounds to do that, to get to stand back up, I'm down with, actually, right? I'm down with this idea, whether you call it, a knockout, it's like trying to just get back up or whatever. But I do like the idea of being incapacitated for the round and having a chance to come out of it, right?
I feel like it's the ref doing the little countdown.
Exactly.
While you're down to see if you can get back up.
Totally down with that. Maybe change the name of death saving throw. Maybe it's not just death, but it's because that would be nice too. Again, I would like to also see something. I've another idea. This is side tangent, but I've considered looking into doing an automatic incapacitation blow, where if you receive a certain percentage of damage equal to your life, so a certain percentage of your max, right? So even if it's not how much you currently have, or again, different ways to do it, but
No, I get it.
A certain amount of damage happens to you, you basically get knocked out, and you have essentially death saving throws. You have 3 chances to wake up, or you're knocked out for the rest of the round, or until someone comes and wakes you up.
I've honestly really felt like there's needed to be a mechanic for that for a while. Because
I have in High Point, you can call shot that. Like, you can attempt to knock someone out, not just their last shot where you can do a non-lethal. I actually allow for called shots to incapacitate while they have plenty of HP. But those are extremely hard and rare to accomplish.
And it's, if without an actually understanding of like why it is or isn't happening, because like think about, I'm a martial artist, so I think like I know that there are a lot of ways to accomplish that. Like some people will say, hey, I want to do a little judo chop or something like that to knock him out. And I'm like, it doesn't work. This dude's really beefy. He's got like thick neck muscles. It doesn't really work like that. Like there's reasons for a certain individual to have a lot more constitution and that not to work. But
hey,
there
Cosmic,
are other things. There are other aspects of that where there are certain nerves where I don't care how beefy you are, this would take you down.
Yeah, as long as it's as long as it's close enough to the surface, you don't have protection. We know it's gonna hurt. Yeah,
and so like if there's a way to like understand or like mechanically articulate how either this is or isn't happening or whatever, like if I wanted to like do a throat punch and like whatever, something like that. So I totally get that.
Hitting certain nerve points can be difficult on a muscular person. Collapsing someone's windpipe is not difficult regardless of how much muscle they have. Like that windpipe doesn't have that much guard, right? So I totally get you on that one, and that's where I'm going with this, right? Like so. I've toyed around with an incapacitation amount of damage where it's similar to death saving throws, where it's like you're basically knocked out. I'll give you 3 chances to stand back up, and otherwise now you're not dead. You will wake up I'll give you 1d4 hours or 1d4 minutes. Like, because you got to think in real terms too. In being knocked out in the real world, you never want to be knocked out for more than a couple seconds. If you're knocked out for minutes on end, like in the movies, you're basically suffering brain damage. Like, let's face it, if you get knocked out for hours, you're brain damage. But in a battle, if you think about it, every round's a minute. You can basically say you're knocked out for 1d4 rounds. But you have a chance every round to get back up. Right. And if you fail until you're 1d4, you're just knocked out until someone comes after you, but you're not dead. Right. And or it's like 1d4 rounds after combat or something. The idea is that I like that idea. But going back to death saving throws regularly, it makes sense to have the chance to get back up. And it makes sense, like you've said, that it's easy to bring them back afterwards. But what I would like to now do, bringing this whole topic full circle, is I would like to blend and fix both of these problems, where adding in what I feel would be a good balance to death saving throws, because it won't happen all the time. Excuse me, chat. It won't happen all the time. And it will add the aspect that death saving throws can be like fearsome, like they can be kind of scary, but it doesn't make every single time as scary, right? Because combat is so integral to most gaming sessions that you don't want to change something that drastic, or you don't want to try to change it that drastically, because it just won't even be adopted, right? Like nobody wants to do something super complicated or change death saving throws all around, but if you can tweak it enough, it's more adaptable. So here's what I'm suggesting is, when you go down, when you were brought to 0 HP, when you're using death saving throws as your mechanic, when a character is brought to 0 HP normally by any standard combat, whatever means, do your death saving throws. Do your normal. Mm-hmm. But in a situation where a character is brought down to 0 HP by basically a critical means, and that could be the enemy hit them with the nat 20, like a critical hit. Mm-hmm. They took a very, very big fall, like not just a 10-foot fall, took damage and died, but like a 100-foot fall, fell off a castle wall. Something that would just insta-kill them, or even just rack up enough fall damage that it would kill them. Or narratively, they died in a very spectacular way, right? Like they tried to do something in combat and it narratively looked awesome and it failed. Like they either just missed or whatever and it put them in a bad situation. But basically, when you essentially want to reward or heighten this death saving throw, when it basically is worth it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I call it's a critical death save, right? So you have your normal death save. And like the title, I want to call this one a critical death save. So this is when, in a critical moment, something's brought you to 0 HP, whether it's narratively, roleplay wise, a critical hit during combat, but something big takes you to 0 HP. This is what happens.
Okay.
You still get 3 chances, but instead of just rolling 1 die for a death save throw 3 times, each round for the 3 rounds, you're going to roll 3 dice.
Okay.
And basically what you're going to do,
D20s?
all D20s, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be actually just rolling flat stat checks. So this is going to be whatever your mechanic is, whether it's above the, you have to roll over the stat that you have, whether you have to roll under the stat that you have. Like in high point, it's roll under, but closest to is better, right? But still have to roll, closest to without going over. But the idea is you do a stat check for the following stats: strength, intelligence, and constitution. So 3 rounds, you have to make me a strength check, an intelligence check, and a constitution check on these critical death save. When you make all 3, if you've succeeded in all 3 in 1 round, you're up. Just like a regular death save. You get all 3, boom, you're up, you're good. You get 3 rounds to get all 3. So you have to succeed all 3 in the same round to stand up. Now, this is
in the same round?
In the same round. Now, this is draft 1. I've thought about maybe you just have to succeed all 3 in general, which I think is the better version. I just haven't thought it all the way through.
Right.
But the alternative version would be you just have to succeed all 3 in any of the rounds. So you could succeed strength first, then the next round succeed intelligence, and then you wouldn't be rolling strength. And then the third round you could do constitution. I think that's the better option instead of having to do all 3 at once. It depends on how nice you're being and the difficulty level. So those are 2 options. Is you just have to succeed in any order. As long as you get all 3, you'll stand back up. Or you have to do all 3 in the same round. But either way, the reason for this is for every time you fail on a particular stat. So let's say the first round, I succeed in a strength check. I fail my intelligence check, but I succeed in my constitution. The next round, either I have to roll all 3 again to get them all 3. But if you don't like that, if that's too harsh, then the other alternative was I would just roll intelligence. Let's say I failed it again. And then my third round, I finally rolled it. So I'm back up. But I took 2 fails in intelligence. The idea is now you stand back up. And one of 2 things happens. Again, this is an alternatives I'm thinking about for the type of DM you want to be. Either that person stands back up and now has a permanent -2 to their intelligence. They've lost 2 stats in intelligence for the fails, which is why I say it's nicer if you just let them succeed in any order as long as they succeed all 3,
Right.
Because it stops them from losing. Like if you fail strength, or if you got strength the first time but failed intelligence the second time, and then the second roll you failed strength, why would you lose 1, right? The idea is that you've already succeeded your strength check.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's nicer, and I think it's cleaner that way. I'm just talking about first draft ideas. But the idea is this. Critical death saves, you go down in a very critical way, and for 3 rounds, you have to succeed. You have 3 rounds to succeed a strength check, an intelligence check, and a constitution check. You get 3 rounds to roll all 3. But for every one you fail, you're either going to lose a point in that stat, or the DM, based on the type of damage and the situation that happened, would inflict a permanent debuff to your character. And here's my justification. So I'm going to get to the examples in a second, but here's the reason why I'm choosing these 3 stats and why in this situation I feel like it makes death saving throws better. Because normally it makes sense. You go down, you're fatigued, you've taken too much blood loss, you've gotten knocked unconscious, whatever why you went down to 0 HP, however you look at HP working, you're down to HP. That there's a lot of different ways you can justify that, which makes the standard death saving throws with no permanent loss makes more sense, right? You're adventurers. You're just going to get knocked out a couple times. But when it really gets you, right? When you've really taken a hit, the idea that you should walk away with more than just a scar, I think is what I want to walk away with on this idea, because I'm thinking when you look at someone who is in a car crash, right? There's a lot of different things they can walk away with. So the reason why I've broken it down into these 3 stats is strength. You're either taking a negative in strength or you take a strength level debuff, something like taking a limp. So let's say you die from fall damage. You can either, and then you failed strength twice. So you would either take a -2 in strength permanently from here on out, or the DM, instead of that, could say, hey, you now have a limp and have a -2 to your speed from here on out. That's your debuff. You have a limp, a noticeable limp, and you have a -2 loss to your speed. However you want it as a DM, but the idea is it has to be physical because it's a strength check. And the idea is that during this critical death save, the strength check was how well is their body going to recover. The intelligence check is basically how well did their mind recover? Do they have brain damage? Did they lose intelligence? Or maybe the DM says, hey, you've forgotten your party member's name. Like you've actually forgotten this entire person, like amnesia. Or, hey, your intelligence is now lower, so you have like I brought up earlier, like if it's really bad and you let's say failed intelligence twice, maybe the DM gives you a stutter. And if you're a magic user, maybe that means you now have a 10% chance to fail a spell because you stuttered in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Constitution, you may not have a physical ailment, you may have physically recovered, you may mentally not have any mental issues, but you can only take so much physical damage, right? You get into a car crash, you may not have broken anything, but you can't just keep taking car crashes, right? Just because you survived one, the next one will hurt even more. So Constitution, taking away life points, right? You could either just take away Constitution points, and like you pointed out, that would immediately drop their total life. You can just make a total life. You could just say, hey, for every time you fail, you're going to lose 10, permanent HP. Whatever you want to do, right? And I like this idea because it doesn't make every death saving throw scary, but when it's already scary when an enemy crits on you and you're like, fuck, how much damage is that? But imagine now you're like, I'm almost dead. Fuck, oh my God, guys, I might lose. Because think about that. You're going to not only death saving though, you're not just going to die, but now you might permanently either have debuffs or permanently lose stats. And to me, that makes the death in these situations, and that's why I don't want every death, right? Because it's D&D. It's not meant to be that realistic. And truthfully, in real life, yes, every death should have this, right? Like realistically, but it's D&D. You're going to go through a lot of fights. You're going to go down a lot. You're going to be brought to death a lot. I don't want to disrupt the normal D&D gameplay, and I don't want to disrupt how the flow of the normal game works. But I still feel like death saving throws aren't enough. They don't make you worry enough outside of potentially losing your character. And again, like you've pointed out, like I've pointed out, it's easy if you die to be brought back. This idea for me, the critical death saves would linger even after revival. So let's say you failed all 3, right? Let's say you failed strength once, you failed constitution 3 times, and you failed intelligence once. Even if your party members bring you back after that battle, even if they go and revive you, you still have those negative debuffs. Because you not only died, but your body wasn't able to do them, right? So if you say passed your first strength, your first strength check, but then still died, you wouldn't have any strength. Like your body was fine. Physically, your body didn't gain an ailment, but you failed your intelligence and constitution. So those, even if you get revived, even if you get brought back from the dead, you're still going to have those impairments. And that, I think, makes death feel worse.
I am liking this a lot so far. The one thing I do want to mention is I think that it is hard, like for instance with the wizard, if he had a stutter, that is it's an almost character breaking ability.
And that's why I would reserve that for having to you would have to take negatives in multiple things.
Which is why I think that doing that to a character, especially unexpectedly, can suck, can make them just literally not want to play that character anymore, and just kill the game. And I wouldn't want to do that. just for a narrative's sake. Like, I wouldn't want to kill the whole enjoyment of this person and the vibe that we have. So
and that's
what
where
I would
it's up
want
to
to
the DM.
do,
That's why it's totally up to the DM.
what I want to do is, I think something like
justifiable.
that. I think something like that can be done, like, especially if you prepare them ahead of time. If you say, because especially outlining this mechanic beforehand, letting people know this is how we do these types of deaths.
This is not something you spring on people. This is something that would have to be established.
When a situation is about to happen and somebody's trying to do something dangerous, something scary,
that could result in a critical death
that could result in a significant, and you be like, listen, there's a chance here that you are going to experience a critical death save right here.
And
there is a chance
I totally
that
don't
something,
mind that.
and if you bring that up to me, like, you could lose the ability to cast spells or something like that.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like obviously you wouldn't just be like, oh, hey, magic user, you have a stutter now. Fuck your spell. It's 50-50 chance that you're gonna fail. Like, you don't just do that. That's why I said 10%, because it's still it's like because I say 10% because if you also go back to second edition rule sets, there's actually spell fail. So there's already a mechanic built in for a percentage chance to fail, which is why I like that idea. But that's just, again, this is just a draft. So, but I appreciate what you're saying too. Is yes, you don't want to use this to end the game, which is why I wouldn't want this on every death save. This has to be like this is why I don't want this in like, oh, you got ambushed by some thieves and he got a nat 20. Oh, roll table. Oh, you now got like stabbed in the leg. You now have a permanent limp and you can't walk. Like. That doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be on every nat 20, because a nat 20 feels bad already, man. Like, then, it has to be, that's why I call it, like, I want it to be a critical death save, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, oh, the enemy crit 20'd, or like nat 20'd on you. You have to do those. You don't have to be that way. Like, sometimes they just nat 20, but it's still just like a peasant trying to stab you, right? That doesn't mean that all of these things are going to happen. But if the situation, I think, calls for it, right? Like you said, hey man, this is, if you go up, or like if they're about to, like, if they have a chance to fight someone, but they have a chance not to, and you could be like, hey man, this guy has the chance to critically fail, like critically damage you. And that could lead to some death
some
saves.
dangerous stuff.
And I 100% believe in prefacing this with people, but this is why I agree with you. Yes, that would be game changing. That could make someone want to leave the game. But here's my rebuttal to that. I don't disagree with you. I think you're absolutely right about that. You know me though, as a DM, in that respect, in my opinion, I wouldn't want that particular type of player, but that's just because we approach the game differently. They want, like, if they're that ruined in terms of like, this happened to me, I don't want to play anymore. It's like, are you more about the narrative? Like, are you more about the story and the things that are happening to your character, or are you more about the build? And I know that it's
I definitely hear where you're coming from, but it's a
mindset of D&D.
I wanna present this to you because I get that there are some people who literally just want their character build to be their character build, but I also know that because I've been in a similar situation, not by any means the same, but a situation where the way the DM was trying to take the consequences for the failure or the crit or whatever was going to basically change the narrative of my character.
Gotcha.
And it felt like it didn't belong, like it didn't fit, like it wasn't right. And so it's like I get the need sometimes for something to happen, but if there isn't a way to
mitigation, it's all about mitigation, right?
Yes. And like finding like, okay, can we make it be something that still fits the scenario but isn't this?
Well, and again, you can the very easy way to do this is make the critical situations warnable. Like, hey, what you're about to attempt could result in a critical death, meaning critical death saves. It could be reserved for only boss fights. You could say, hey, you're not going to result in critical death saves out and about. You could just make personal rules as a DM, right? You could say, I'm not just going to let anybody lower than level 10 crit kill you. I'm not going to let a non-plot battle crit kill you. You can make those because that makes sense,
Because
right?
that's
you do
again
want to
the
balance
purpose
it,
of
right?
it.
Yeah, you want to tell a story. Like you're not actively trying to kill them at every corner. You're not actively trying to make everything kill them, and that's because if you wanted to, you would just make this every death save. But I like this idea, and this is the rough draft like building. This is why I want to do this for this episode. This is an insight on how because I've talked about what things I've built in the past and how they ended up in High Point, but this is an active idea I'm working on, and this is why I wanted to talk about it because this is what we go through. This is the things that we do in order to flesh out these ideas because we have to throw it against the wall and not just see what sticks, but how it sticks. You know, what does it do after 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Like we're the kind of people who
is
it's
it
like,
boiling? Is it
like
is
what's
it
happening
sticky?
here? So, you know, that's what I like about this idea is it makes those situations where it wouldn't make every battle scary for death saves, but going into some battles would be like, guys, this is okay.
Like imagine you're the tank. You're the tank and you're up there tanking, being all tanky, and you're just but you get down there and this boss has just been critting left and right and you've been taking most of it, but you're getting low. And if you take another crit, like it could be bad.
And it helps with teamwork because now you have to make sure who's going to be able to take the health, who's going to get the health bump. We do have something from Cosmic here on this topic. Hey, Cosmic, nice to see you again, buddy. So your D&D session today wasn't a proper D&D session. It was world building for the next campaign. Hey, those are always great. I do like those kind of campaign sessions.
I'm curious, is this the next campaign with the character we helped him create, or is this the same campaign as the what was it, the ancient dragon that he was supposed to be?
Yeah, what campaign is this one for?
Fighting?
I mean, I do like those ones though. I do like, I mean, whether you call them session zeros or just, you know, I like to call them metagaming sessions.
Yeah.
Like I prefer metagaming sessions because a lot of times you're talking more than just about the actual campaign. You're talking about like how it's going to evolve, the rules and what
integration.
You're doing. So I like the metagaming concept, but yeah, no, good on that. And so he had a question about the topic about the critical death save. So he's saying, what about by non-combat means, like a trap or something similar, or if it was like a poison trap and the poison brings them to zero, even a while after the trap was triggered. So yeah, in this particular case, I think we already covered that. This was really only going to be reserved for like, again, I don't think a trap would justify it, right? This would have to be something super justifiable, something that's out of the character's, you know, out of the norm way of dying, right? Excuse me 1 second. I love that mute button. Okay, so so I think I think we already got that one, and then he had a specific question. So what if an item? So what if he has an item that negates crits and it would treat them as a normal hit? The crit death save still applies. So yeah, so let's say he has something that removes crits. Now see, this is where the idea of I'm using the term crit death save, but I'm not using it in the sense of a crit attack.
Yeah.
Now granted, in some situations a crit roll would suffice. And if you had, that would be up to the DM, that if you had an item that negates crits, I can understand that. But the reason I say critical death save is not so much a critical roll as in always a nat 20, but a situation that would lead to a critical death. Again, something above and beyond the standard D&D scenario that killed you, right? Again, not a bandit, not an ambush, not a rock falling on you, but like you're trying to get into a castle and you decide, I'm going to scale the wall.
So
guess what? That action can lead to a critical death.
There is this in the Critical Role campaign. There's a character who's a grave cleric, and grave clerics have this ability where they can use their channel divinity to negate a crit on an ally within a certain distance from them, right? And so there are a lot of times in that campaign where narratively somebody could have or would have died or gone down, but he was able to use his reaction, this divine intervention, so to speak, to negate that blow, to basically soften that strike, to basically lessen that whatever.
Here's a good example.
You know, here's I would think that would have an effect on the crit itself.
It would. So here's
situation.
Here's how I would see blending what you just said and what Cosmic is asking, right? So if you have an item, if you have some way to negate a crit, I still think the crit death save, the crit death could still apply. And here's why. Because it's more, again, because we're not tying the critical death or the critical death save to a critical roll. That's just one of the triggers.
Right, yes.
If, let's say, you have 10 HP. Excuse me. Let's say you have 10 HP and someone's about to just hit you and they were going to crit. Mm-hmm. Someone negates the crit and they're still able to do enough damage to kill you. Mm-hmm. Now, let's just say it's just regular, no big deal. But let's just say, again, here's how I see it. Let's say in battle, in context, that person comes up behind you, like a rogue or whatever, is going to stab you in the back, gets a crit, someone negates the crit, but the damage is still enough to take you to 0. In that context, I still think a critical death happens. Not because it was a critical roll, but even though they negated the damage of the critical roll in a mechanical sense, it was still you could still say it was a critical enough attack, like it hit you right. Now, granted, you could justify both arguments. You could say, no, he attacked, like you could justify and say, as a DM, if you want to use this alternative rule set for death saves, you can make a rule. In combat, it has to be a critical hit. That could be a rule. Not just a critical death, but a critical hit. Outside of combat, it could be anything that takes you to 0 hit points. That's fantastical.
Right.
But if you want to, you could say in combat, if they negate the nat 20, even if you go to 0, it's not a critical death. I think that's going to be a DM to DM choice.
I'm thinking of like two different possible implementations. It could either be, hey, it is a critical hit, and it takes you all the way down. So, for instance, if you had something like the Goliath race does, where you can basically you can use, I think, a bonus action or a reaction or something like that to roll a d12 and just negate that much damage on yourself. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if somebody crit on you, right, you could just lessen the damage that they would have done. So it was not as big of a hit, but it was still technically a crit hit.
Yeah, but if you didn't go to 0 hit points, then...
So in a scenario like that, you can either do it where because it was a crit hit, even though you lessened the amount, you still have to do the crit save. Or you could do it where there needs to be, like you were talking about earlier, a certain chunk of your health. If you do like 50% of your health, if I do a one hit that does 50% of your health, like that is going to be a crit hit and you're going to have to roll. Right. But if you're able to lessen that amount for some reason.
The crit is supposed to replace death saving, so you have to have been reduced to 0 hit points.
Right, but still.
So if the crit hits you and you lessen the damage and you don't go down, there wouldn't be any saves.
Now, you lessen the damage, like you said a moment ago, you don't lessen it enough to stop you from going down, but the idea is you could lessen it enough to stop yourself from getting a crit hit.
See, so
if it were damage.
So I would say my ruling would be, if I had to justify it, I would say that if it were in combat and someone were technically able to remove the critical aspect of the nat 20, I could say maybe that would remove the critical death. But if you're going to get hit by a critical hit, even if you have a way to mitigate damage but you still die,
in my scenario,
it would still be a critical death.
In my scenario, it wasn't about you getting a crit hit. It was specifically just taking a certain amount of damage. So what was triggering the having to roll these 3 death saves wasn't being crit on. It was taking X amount of damage. Yeah, that did take you down.
Right. And that could be another justifiable thing where if you want to basically say, like, if you get hit for a certain amount, you know, like
50% of your health, like theoretically speaking. But if I have 100 health and you're able to do 55 damage to me, right? That would technically trigger a critical hit. But if I am able to use this class feature, this racial feature, to lessen the damage, and I lessen it by 10, so now it's 45.
See, that's getting too I feel like that's complicating it more out of the realm, because again now you're trying to do math on how much damage. I mean, if you're going to do it based off of that, you might as well do it based off of, because this will allow it to get worse the lower health you are. But if you want to do it based off of how much they hit you, how about if they ever do either twice or 50% more than your current amount of damage? So if you have 10 health and they do 15, that's, or 15 or more.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that way it's a lot easier math. It's however much you have, add 50%.
Plus half.
And if they do that much or more, it's a critical death. So they don't need a crit hit, but they have to hit you for at least twice or 50% more than you currently have.
That would really suck if you only had 2 hit points, though.
But see, then that's where it makes it kind of shitty, is if you're always going to be down low when you finally die, right? Yeah. So, and that's where I'm like, that's why I think it would be better to just leave it, if you're, again, I would say that it should be up to the DM. I don't know if I would make a hard, fast rule that in combat, it absolutely has to always trigger on a crit hit. Mm-hmm. I think there are plenty of, as we've just talked about, I think there are plenty of justifiable causes for a what we're calling right now a critical death, which would justify a critical death save. I think in combat, it could be anything from, it's a boss battle and they use a legendary action. It's a boss battle and they rolled a nat 20 and they killed you. They did so much damage that I just have to again, twice the amount of damage you currently have or whatever. But yeah, basically, like, I'm in high point as I develop this. It's not just going to be like, here are the 2-3 things that will happen. It's more of I want to develop a critical death concept. I'm trying to see if I can work with death saves because that's a concept that's already worked. Yeah. What the goal eventually for me is to find a simplified way of making near-death experiences have long-lasting effects. Yeah. That's the end goal. If I'm being honest, what I want for High Point is to make those near-death experiences more than just scary. I almost lost my character. I want you to, like I've told you about the situations I've done it like behind the scenes where I'll inflict ailments that people don't necessarily know about for role play and narrative purposes later. But the idea of this warrior being brought to death hundreds of times and literally walking away not unscathed. But it's like, it's one thing to say, well, I have a badass scar. It's like a scar does nothing unless it ruins your eyesight. Like,
I was going to mention that, like, potentially instead of strength, depending upon narratively what's happening, taking that hit to charisma instead of strength. Just for social
and so you
benefits.
Could do, I'm toying around with a lot of different ways. I just wanted to bring the draft here, but I've been even thinking about doing, like, if you don't want to do the straight stat point, like, oh, you missed 1 strength, you go down 1 strength. Mm-hmm. You could do combinations like, hey, you lost 1 strength and 2 intelligence. Okay, so we're going to say, or you lost 2 strength and 1 intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like, okay, well, we don't want to give you a limp because you didn't really fall. You didn't really die in battle. Or it's like you didn't really like get like gashed in any body part. Like like your throat got slit. Like, your throat got slit. And you failed 2 strength and 1 intelligence. You have a hard time talking, and now your charisma went down. Right? Like, that's what I want to do in High Point. Is I don't want to make it, like, I like the idea. The first idea was, well, yeah, you would just drop strength. But I like the idea of an ailment, not just a stat jump. Yeah. And a stat bump sucks for character builds. Like, some character builds can get ruined by that. And I like the idea of it makes sense to do that. But I personally, for narrative purposes and for High Point purposes, like the idea of a debuff. So I think I'm leaning more towards, depending on what you fail, we'll lean into and what combination you fail. So it's not just you're going to get something for strength and for wisdom or and intelligence and in constitution if you fail those. It's what combination did you fail and what makes the most sense for you to walk away with, right? Like, you drink too much, you got alcohol poisoning. Maybe you walk away and can't drink alcohol without getting violently ill because you lost all your constitution. So you don't get a negative to constitution, but you can't use your constitution for alcohol anymore. Or you were poisoned enough to where you, like you're a wizard, you say, hey, how many spells do you currently know? And just be like, oh, you know 12 spells? Roll me a d12. You permanently forgot that spell and can never cast it again. Because, like, you fucked up your head drinking, and you've just, like, You can never cast that spell. Like little things, just one little tiny thing, but make it make sense for the situation. Like if it's a wizard,
Right.
and they like, fall or whatever, and it's like they lose their strength, be like, you can't hold a wand anymore. You have to find a new focus. So it could disrupt their character build, like roleplay wise.
Right.
But it wouldn't undo what their entire build can do, right?
Right.
They would be, you could say, hey, you can't hold your wand anymore, so until you find a replacement, you're going to have a hard time casting magic. Sorry. I don't know. I like this idea of inflicting something on the character long term to not only have them fear death, but to make death a reminder. Because again, if you think about the concept of like an old veteran, right? Every scar is a reminder, every limp, every little thing they had to do, right? Like the little tweaks that they've made on their armor in order to just, to like help compensate for something. I want to instill that in the players, because it also, I think, can help provide a little bit of that, what we've talked about before, about pulling people away from, leaning too much into the build and not as much into the character development.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where it's like, it shouldn't disrupt the build, but it should shake the foundation just enough to get them out of this rut of, I know exactly what I'm doing. But again, I don't know. Rough draft. It's an idea that
I definitely
I'm
like the direction that we're going with it. I think that there's a lot to be said for being able to. I have a hard time calling it fear, because I don't want people to be scared, but I don't want people to be reckless either.
Exactly.
I want you to be wise. I want you to discern what's a smart risk to take. If you're just out here and you know that there's no consequences for any, and that's what I mean by like no consequences. Like, oh, I went down, here's a healing potion. Oh, I went down, healing word. I'm like, all right, cool, but like, that's a scary ass dragon, bro.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to run up in that, like that ice breath. Like, you could lose the feeling in all of your extremities.
Oh, that's a great one.
You are so numb.
Dude,
you experienced hypothermia.
What if he kills you by his breath weapon, right? Just toasts you.
Oh my gosh.
So he toasts you. You lose all of your intelligence saves. But then they bring you back after the fight. What I would do, because you died and officially died because of intelligence, I'd make you mortally afraid of fire from there on out. You'd never sit close to a fire pit.
That's
fire
very interesting.
Magic terrifies you.
That would be very
fire
interesting.
Creature, and fire creatures
that I like.
naturally instill fear, like the fear effect. So anything that's on fire, like a creature that's on fire,
or
uses fire,
or just seeing a fire creature, you have to roll like a wisdom saving throw or be afraid or something like that.
And you are stricken with, like, you basically have to go away from it.
It's lightweight, like
PTSD.
turn undead from the clerics, except you're the one being affected. That's crazy.
It's like PTSD,
I like
right?
that.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can, so instead of just doing straight stat drops, which I think in some settings I'm sure people can find be useful, but that's what I want to do. Is I want to look at it from a point of view of, how did you die? Which one of these did you fail? And how do those combinations make sense? And what are you walking away with, right? Cosmic says, and I do kind of agree with him, crit death save compared to the nat 20s also being called crits is kind of confusing. Critical is kind of overused. Like, there's a lot of critical things. I mean, it does roll off the tongue, a critical death leading to a critical death save.
Yeah.
It is one of those things where people would have to understand it. They'd have to get over the fact that it doesn't just mean a nat 20, like all nat 20s. But we will have to probably workshop some names. I mean, I think a critical death, because it's critical death is not something that's used, like that phrase right there.
Yeah.
Oh, did you die, or was it a critical death? Like, what is? I think that would be unique enough, even though critical is highly used, and then that leading to a critical death save, I think makes sense. But we probably could workshop some new
I'll
names.
say this. I think if you call it critical death, I think people are going to be like, what's that? And so they're going to have to ask regardless. And then once they do, they'll find out, oh, it means X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And
again, it's leading off of the death saves, which is now it's just you have a death and then you have a critical death, but we could workshop some names and see if there is
extreme death. You mean, violent death.
Because you also want something
fantastic
that's like,
death.
Yeah, because you want one of those things where it's like you want it to,
but critical death does sound the best. so far.
You wanted to tell them out the gate, you want to paint a picture, right? If you're like,
Yeah.
dude, this could result in a critical death. Like, even if you've never heard that before, you're like, hold up. That doesn't sound good. Like,
what now?
Like, it already sounds worse than, hey, man, if you scale this cliff, you could die. They're like, oh, yeah, but we have a cleric. But if you tell that same person, hey, man, you scale this cliff and it could result in a critical death, they're going to be like, can my cleric? Like, they're going to, like, it's going to pause, right? And that's what I think is, like, if we could find some way of workshopping a name that not only immediately gets your attention, but sets it apart from you could die. That's really what the name should do, is set it apart from, this is just a death of your character.
What about legendary death? Like legendary action?
Memorable, consequential. Consequential death. Like,
what was I was thinking of your time, and there's flux and fixed. No, I don't
cataclysmic death. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of we'll have to workshop some names. I mean, I like critical death for now. Like, I think that's going to be the draft
is
name.
the trash name. Like
no, the draft.
Draft name. But no, it does roll initially. It may be a common piece of terminology, and I do agree that there are times where people use it loosely, like, you know, when you use a term that's not for its intended definition, but it's kind of close enough, you know, like how people use literally now, and it's whatever, it's fine.
No, I got you.
But, like, yeah, so if we do need to find something more accurate, more specific, but like I said, I think it works for now. Yeah, I think it's good.
But yeah, we'll probably circle back on this topic another time. But yeah, it's one of those things I wanted to bring to the table and share with everybody, because these are the ideas, again, that it's like, we could call this homebrew, you can call it whatever you want, but this to me is at the heart of D&D. Is, again, you don't just have to take what they told you how to play and take it at face value, right? You can take it and go, but how can I make it better for me and my players? And making it better doesn't mean that you know better than Wizards of the Coast, but you have to remember, right? Like, the reason why I'm so big on altering things and not calling it homebrewing, right? Homebrewing is something from scratch. Altering the rules or altering what's in the book, in my opinion, is at the heart of D&D always, because you also have to remember, since the very beginning, when they started publishing, you know, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and even, you know, just D&D first edition, they have to they're not pandering, but they have to make it accessible to the masses. Like, they are a business. They have to make it accessible and amenable to as many people as possible. So death saves are easy. Death saves are boring, but they're simple. They are straightforward. Mm-hmm. Everyone understands them. Everyone can apply them. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. And it doesn't mean that they intended it to be. It's just, when they wrote it, it's much easier for them to say, hey, take this as your foundation, what we've always talked about, and build on it.
And I honestly think that's a lot of why they made it, because people can do exactly what you're doing. You're gonna be like, hey, I like this. Hey, it's not right away. Hey, you get 3 tries. Hey, you get 3 pets. Hey, you get whatever. Now let's build off of it. Like, what makes more sense than just a random save? And something I wanted to bring up for you is, like, is the DC a flat 10 like it is for death saves? Or is the DC going to change and adjust depending upon some circumstantial whatever?
And this is why, for me, when I would do, or if I do critical death saves.
Oh, that's right. You said it was
your stat check.
It's your stat. So it's whatever your stat is.
However you mechanically do a stat check. So when you tell someone as a DM, hey, make me a strength check, however you do that strength check in your realm or in your setting, that's how they would do the strength, intelligence, and constitution save each time.
I'll say this, for 5th edition, if you ask somebody to make a strength check, what they're likely going to do is they're going to roll a d20 and they're going to add their strength modifier. But the DC that they're trying to beat
doesn't have,
is relative to the situation.
So so you could do a base DC, and because it's a critical death, just make it 15.
Increase it by 5, yeah.
Because that way, again, we're trying to keep it simple, right? Like, I'm going to do something more complicated because mine's based off stat checks, which have no modifiers. It's just, what is your check, and can you get closer to it without going over? I like that. That's very simple to me. Doesn't make any. No one has to do any math. You just have to know how close you got to your number.
Yep.
But yeah, if you wanted to make it big, like really critical, just add 5. Just make the DC a 14, 15,
I
or
honestly
16.
think that's very
super
fair.
simple.
You got a good, you got a really good range there for you to make it, and a decent one for you to miss.
Yeah.
So like, and for the base one, it makes sense that it would be 10. It's just like roll better than average.
Yeah.
You know, just roll better than average to keep yourself in an
it's a
unconscious
50-50 chance
state.
at that point. Yeah.
So
and this one is not a 50-50 chance. This one is you have to try hard.
Yeah.
Because your body's
You gotta
actively
push.
trying. Because remember, you can still be brought back after this. It's just the fact that these are like you're not rolling these saves in the sense that you're trying to stay alive. You're rolling these saves as in this is your body trying to survive the
Come
blow.
back.
Yeah. So it's more than just you trying to stay conscious. It's the strength check is because your body's trying not to physically stay damaged, right? Like it's your ability not to like have a broken bone or you're bleed out or something like that, right? Yeah, so I like the idea. It will be workshopped more. We'll think some more names, and we'll continue to workshop that. Cosmic, while you're here, since you've been here not only for a very long time in the stream, but since you've been here this whole tonight, I'm really curious to know what your opinion is on the new setup. Since you've been around the longest, you probably have the most understanding and probably.
How do we sound?
You probably. Notice the changes probably more than anybody else at this point. So I'm just really curious if you like the new changes. Are they that noticeable? I'm hoping at least the audio is better.
Yeah.
The video is whatever. Like we've dialed it in a little bit. I think the video looks better. But
I'm really glad that auto-focusing, because I know that was an issue for a little while.
Audio focusing is done.
Like, it's really nice.
But yeah, we're really interested. You guys on YouTube as well. If you're watching this, leave a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the changes. I'm going to be looking at it for sure myself.
If the quality changes between live on Twitch to being on YouTube,
the quality shouldn't change too much because we're live on YouTube at the same time, and then it's just the same as video.
That's fair.
So it should just be fine. But yeah, I'm hoping it's a lot better. I'm liking the setup here. I'm liking my stream deck and the setup now. If you guys watch me on the other video, which isn't available on YouTube anymore because it got copyrighted.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the setup is so much more simple now. It takes us just a minute or two at this point to just dial this all in, where it used to take us 10-15. So we're doing a lot better nowadays. So I'm hoping it's noticeable.
We getting it.
And if it's not, we feel better about it. So that's okay.
Whatever's fine.
Cosmic may be AFK. That tends to happen if he doesn't answer right away. But yeah, that was all I had for today. Kind of a low-key day. I don't feel like we need to push this one any further unless you had any other major topics. But
we did good, and I have some things brewing for next week's homebrew if we don't have any more submissions. But
yes,
I'm actually curious to see if Cosmic, if you are in the chat anywhere, if how your character creation ended up going.
Oh yeah,
and what actually
Fathomless.
If you
he got the actually got to, did you see that? He actually got
I did hear about that. He got the air. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm super.
And he went the Fathomless route too.
So the Aerocroaker being able to fly, breathe underwater, swim, and then have that staff of the pilot. Oh my god.
It's gonna be cray. It's gonna be cray. So,
all right. Well, I think that's gonna be us for today because I don't think Cosmic is still here with us. So we'll give him a few more seconds while we do our outro. But I think that's gonna be
check
us.
It. Rewatch the end of this Cosmic on Discord or on YouTube, and then hit us up in the Discord with the answer. How about that?
yeah, do that. Then we'll be able to reread that the next time we're in stream as well to talk about his character build. But yeah, that's going to be us for today. So thank you so much for joining us in chat. If you're joining us on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, go ahead and drop a like. If you disliked it, at least drop us a comment. Let us know what we can do better. We're always looking to improve. If you want to join our Discord and join our community, if you have ideas that you want to discuss, if you have questions that you have for Kage and I that you want answered personally or on stream, or if you have your own homebrew that you want to submit, you can join our Discord, which is going to be popped in the chat once again. And you can join our Discord, join the community, submit ideas. We do homebrew review every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I stream on Fridays, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time, and we just do more of a deep dive topic. Sometimes Kage will be in the studio with me on Fridays, but is mostly Mondays. And then sometimes I'll just pop up during the week or on the weekends when I do just random games, but we mainly just focus on D&D discussions. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we see you on Friday, and let us know how we're doing in the Discord. Appreciate you guys, and that's us for today.
Deuces, my friends.